So please take over. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pramod, for organizing this very important platform, especially Nepal in multilateral and international forum. And this morning we have actually being a small power located between two giant Asian powers, India and China. Our engagement with the multilateral forum platform and multilateralism, multilateral diplomacy for Nepal is a kind of like survival strategy in one aspect specifically. And so that our ancestors, right from the Prithivinath Saha, had like guided what strategy foreign policy should Nepal adopt to survive this country and to foster our national interest. And those are still like very much rational and important for the survival and prosperity of this country and well-being of the people of this country. And having like understood that fact, we Nepal entered into UN platform when Nepal got UN membership in early like 1955. And since then, our engagement with the multilateral forum, especially through the UNPeacekeeping, is one of the exemplary engagement. And what we should do more to make our engagement in the multilateral platform more robust, and what we need to do back in home, those probably will be discussed by our panelists this morning. As per Pramodji, Ambassador Madhuramar Acharya is still has not joined the session yet, so I will request him later on. And as per the schedule, chronologically, we have 4 other speakers, and I don't have their bios, but I know those people, those who are speaking this morning. Somehow I can like spell out, share their bios, and if I could not like make your bios very much complete, so please forgive me in advance. And we'll have I will request Antara Singh, very young diplomat. Antara ji, are you back Kathmandu or Geneva still?
I am in Geneva still, sir. Thank you.
Antara Singh is a Foreign Service Officer of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She graduated from American University quite not long ago. If I say long ago, she might be not younger one. See, a couple of years ago, she used to teach at the law school, Kathmandu Law School in Bhaktapur. And before she joined Ministry of Foreign Affairs, after she became Foreign Service Officers, she was posted to Geneva. And hopefully, after completion of like posting over there, she's now leave. So far as I have known, and Antara Singh is one of the promising diplomat, being a law graduate. So this morning, I think she will speak on the same because she has already experienced law graduate and already experienced in our multilateral diplomatic, like one of the very important platform in Geneva. After New York, Geneva is more like, in some aspect, Geneva is more important for multilateral platform for Nepal, promoting and protecting our, the engagement in GATT or even like WTO. WTO is there in Geneva. So I would like to request Antaraji to speak. I'm not aware about how much time I have to spare for the speakers. Pramodji, is 10 minutes, 15 minutes? So let me know. Is there anyone from niche?
Yes, sir, please.
What time like I could request to the speakers? 10 minutes?
7 to 8 minutes.
Okay, should be more like, okay, Antaraji, 8 minutes, all the way from Geneva. I welcome you, and please, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, my thanks to the organizers, and it's a great pleasure and honor to be sharing today's panel. with very distinguished presence such as Khadga KC sir and others as well in the panel who are very recognizable to me since a long time. And this opportunity is here to discuss together on the multilateral issues and Nepal's participation in international forums. A very important topic for countries, as Dr. Khadga KC sir said, with a smaller power nation. That term is very aptly used. I was also going to start my presentation with that. To state briefly how I organized the presentation, it would be in three parts. The first would be the how we are motivated and guided with theoretical underpinnings at the multilateral settings, what Nepal is doing from a practitioner's perspective in the last 5 to 6 years, I would say, with the UN affairs. And also the second part of my presentation would be using the template of Human Rights Council and some other international organizations within Geneva to how Nepal is making, engaging in issues and undertaking its performance and prioritizing the issues. And the third part would be about, our strengths and challenges. And in the concluding part, I would be discussing about the opportunities I see in the current context that lies in for smaller power nations like us, how we can engage better with the multilateral institutions. So to start with, the setting has been really well aptly done by Dr. Khadga KC in terms of saying that for smaller power nations, there are specific challenges. We do have strengths, although the setting of the tone in the 21st, geopolitical configuration has been done by the large major powers, selected few, which we know, the major powers and especially the West holding that kind of a leverage. We do have the middle powers, and we don't lie therein. The middle powers being, the Scandinavia and the others, from the American and the Asian region as well. We would rank a tier lower than that in terms of our capacities. We are definitely not a very smallest of the nation in its traditional sense of definition. As we know, the World Bank and Commonwealth defines 1.5 million population, and Forum of Small States uses a threshold of 10 million population. We do not rank that. There is a misconception largely within Nepal, including among experts, that it's a small state, but we definitely do not rank there. We are much higher than being below the 10 million with our gross national capacities, economic capacities as well. So a threshold above that. So it definitely comes with some strengths. So two factors in the multilateral settings, Nepal is quite motivated by to make its survival, and also in the attempt of its thriving. That would be first to be not left behind the countries as much as possible, economically, politically, socially, to mark its presence using the niche areas as well. And the second aspect would be the risks, and the assessment of the risks that we have if we make much more of a off guard of a voice in the multilateral setting. We do not have a bandwagon or a blocking to support us as much as the larger powers would be having. So therein lies the risks. The theoretical underpinnings would be, that Nepal is definitely performing over the last, hundreds of years from a realist point of view. Our domestic politics, our move from a more conservative to open as well as then integrating with the larger world from the constructivist lens. We are having the impact of international environment, especially joining the multilateral institutions, large financial institutions, neoliberal policies, etc. And then Nepal is also very much trying to form a perceptual image and acting as sort of a mediator, not just within the region, but in the global world as well, with our steadfast values on the international rule of law, international order, and very liberal values as well. So from all these three lenses of the schools of thought, the dominant school of thoughts in IR, we are trying our best to find our survival within the and thriving within the scope of operation. So the second part would be using the template of how we have done in the Human Rights Council and other international organizations in the multilateral forums. So my posting here from I would be using this because 2018 was the first time Nepal got elected to the Human Rights Council. It came as a very big achievement, especially because after the 2015 conclusion of peace transition process, the new constitution launched in 2015, and we went through a massive, series of domestic problems with, border supplies blockade and, a lot of earthquake and disasters. We did undergo through all those challenges to find a firm political base within the international rule of law. So 2018 was a chance for us to showcase as well as learn the best practices from other countries within the Human Rights Council, where we have 190 plus countries and the 47 countries are in the council. Now, the Human Rights Council, speaking about it, it is a fusion of, what the intellectual scholars like such as Francis Fukuyama discussing about, identity politics happening. It's all there, the blockings, are there, the regional, the powers, also the religious issues come into the fore. Within that fusion, Nepal has tried its best with the first and the second term of the Human Rights Council serving on issues, especially supporting a broad range of topics that are the problems, challenges within the international forum, like the migrants, issues of migrants, poverty, development, climate change, rights, violence, and then the gender discrimination. We also have institutional buildings such as National Human Rights Commission and the independence of judiciary. We also have this protection of special vulnerable groups such as peasants, and then the access to medicines and vaccines, which developing and the least developed countries are struggling with. These kind of issues we have been negotiating in the Human Rights Council, and we have been voting for the protection of vulnerable groups. Just to give one example, while the developed countries are trying their best, especially in the COVID pandemic context, the pricing of the vaccines in the interest of their countries, whereas there is a whole range of countries being affected by that who cannot afford the innovation as well as produce it in some way in the factories or the industrial level within their economies due to the constraints they are facing, the medicines production. So we have negotiated in the WTO, in Human Rights Council, that the affordable access to these basic supplies should be a matter of human right and not as a matter of, say, a strict property right. This distinction we are making for the benefit of the national interest and the country. So what is known as the separation of hard issues and soft issues within the Human Rights Council. The hard issues being, the resolution to the conflict, sending technical teams by the UN and peacekeeping missions, etc., within the country in severe enmeshment of the conflict. In those positions where there is no consent of the country concerned, Nepal has always taken a very, respectable to sovereignty and the choice of the sovereignty to support that the state consent should be a factor. And so herein we block it with NAM. So the large part of non-alignment countries come together to voice, and Nepal is also a part of them, that without the state consent, no interference of the missions, that is not conducive to the environment of the country. So the hard positions we have been taking along with the non-aligned movement, and within the soft issues we have been taking extremely progressive, especially since our promulgation of the new constitution 2015, extremely progressive positions regarding women's rights. We all of us know Nepal is one of the lead in the region with the representation of women, and that we are voicing in the international forum as other countries to take the best practice of Nepal. And actually we are, given the opportunities, we are requested to send our teams from the government, from the experts from Nepal to share how we could go ahead with the inclusive policies and make it a success for countries such as Afghanistan or others which are enmeshed in conflict still. It's a successful case scenario. And we are invited in multilateral forums to showcase our strengths in this regard. Having said this, we have other strengths. For example, we are parties to most of the international framework agreements within the 8 out of 10 multilateral instruments in the core treaty bodies we are a party to, and we have been reporting very regularly. Nepal is actually one of the top 25% of the countries which have been making regular engagement with the human rights mechanisms, including treaty bodies, the Universal Periodic Review, and others. So these are our strengths and we are capitalizing them. However, we have significant challenges, and from a practitioner's perspective, I'm going to share about 5 points. Which would be, the resource constraint that we have in multilateral institutions, negotiating forums, the human resources comes with a limited, level of trainings, the constraints, institutional capacity are limited. We are still in the traditional domain of operation. We have not shifted to the digital modes of operation, which was blatantly seen after the COVID-19 pandemic, when all kinds of negotiations in the multilateral forum shifted to the digital platforms. And it came without preparation, especially to those countries which are still struggling to climb the ladders of development. So the asymmetric access to information is another challenge that we are facing within the multilateral institutions. The third would be the structural barriers and the geopolitical constraints that we have. And herein lies the tricky balance that Nepal needs to make while we have the geopolitical constraints, rising above them and setting strategic, priorities of allowing us the benefits, accruing the benefits and winning the friends within the multilateral system. Therein lies our benefit. So, one country, one vote system within the UN, and then the others are also advantageous to us. We have been making use of that. And it is actually very interesting to also note that despite being one of the, just the second tier among the 4 tiers that I've mentioned in the beginning, within the second tier, falling within the second tier of the level of our presence, we have been making disproportionate contribution to peacekeeping. We rank somewhere between 2nd and 3rd of the peacekeeping troops within the world.
I request Antara ji, because Ambassador Madhuraman Acharya couldn't join, so that we could consider up to 10 minutes, but still like you have crossed the 10 minutes, so that we will wrap up in the next 1 minute.
Okay, just 1 minute to wrap up then. So I would go to the opportunities now. We discussed about the challenges. I think the first opportunity would be to, we are very good. Nepal has been very good at critically reviewing any prospect within the international forums. Is it good for Nepal? But the disagreements go to such an extent that there is, a very difficult situation to come to an agreement for good strategies. So that kind of a consensus from the political level of the national priorities and the strategies within multilateral levels is needed. I think a fresh view is needed. And the second would be institutional strengthening, coordination among the institutions, collaboration, giving the priority to specializations within multilateral settings. The third would be breaking the silos. We tend to, in the name of specialization, we tend to be within our own ambit. So I think breaking the silos, the new mechanisms for breaking these silos in expertise level of topics such as climate change, for instance, we saw in COP26, where Nepal as a least contributing country, we're having to pay more in terms of, without a loss and damage mechanism in place. So for that, we need to build that kind of collaboration. The fourth would be digital importance on digital transformation. Our diplomacy needs to move to that in the multilateral settings lot of multilateral negotiations now have moved to the digital framework for good. Now they are not returning to the normal, which used to be the traditional way of practicing. So Nepal really needs to amp it up on getting, expertise and then using the opportunity for digital transformation. And then the last would be, using our niche areas. We're using track 2 and track 3 also, not just in bilateral, but also in multilateral settings. I would end at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antaraji. As per Antaraji as well, because of 2050 constitution, we have so many constitutional provision that we can use as a soft power of Nepal, 33% of women's representation in all political sectors and positive discrimination and bureaucracy as well. So I have given her 15 minutes time. It's kind of more than double of more than positive discrimination. So thank you very much. I will make my observation at the end of session. So now let me share Ambassador Madhuramar Acharya. We were anticipating his very experienced, thought-provoking sharing this morning. So because of his unwellness, he could not make to join the session this morning. So having taking advantage of his absence, we'll have some few more minutes leverage for every speaker, so which Antaraji has already capitalized. So now let me introduce my colleague, Santosh Sharma Poudel. Santosh, he graduated from, he did his high school from Antara, went to Japan for his undergrad at Richard-Macon University. After he did his undergrad from Richard-Macon, he went to Singapore, and very elite school of Singapore, and did his master's in IR, one of the renowned school of Asia. And then after he did his PhD, he's almost very close to complete his PhD from the same school in Singapore. Then he has joined Department of International Relations and Diplomacy at TU as a faculty. He has been engaging at the university as a faculty, and in the meantime, he has running a think tank in collaboration partnership with other institutions, government institutions like IFA. He has been hosting seminars and research work on foreign policy, diplomacy, and public governance sectors. A very young, promising academic scholars, Santosh Sharma Poudel, as my colleague as well. Santosh, now he will also speak on the same topics, Nepal in multilateral and international forum. Santosh, over to you, and you will be given some 10 to 12 minutes, and hopefully all of you are Western graduates, develop schools, apprenticed, socialized people, so that time will be one of the value what you learn from the schooling in elsewhere. Over to you.
Santosh. Thank you, Professor Dr. Khadga. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank, first of all, NIC for this opportunity to try out my arguments in the article, which is a work in progress. So it's not complete yet. So I'm looking forward to all the feedbacks from all the prominent scholars and practitioners who are here. Before I get into the presentation, let me first mention a couple of limitations that I have. Like I said before, it's a work in progress, and I have yet to develop a model to integrate 5 indicators, which I'll explain below, into one measurement. So that is still remaining. So let me share some of the slides, because I have a few charts, I think, which are better shown on the screen. If that's visible. So let's dive in. In Nepal, we have consistently seen, heard, or read that multilateral institutions are very important in context of our foreign policy and development policy in general as well. This is reflected in the constitution of Nepal as well. 51 of Nepal's constitution states that Nepal is to conduct an independent foreign policy based on the Charter of United Nations, non-alignment, principle of Panchashil, international laws and norms of world peace. The statement itself is a reflection of how the centrality of international institutions in Nepal's foreign policy conduct. However, how important are those institutions? How do we measure them? How do we see to what extent are they important? I think that's the question that I'm trying to answer in today's presentation. I came across several during the literature review, I came across several articles which talk about Nepal's participation in multilateral institutions such as UN, UNPKO, SARC, BIMSTEC, NAM, and whatnot. However, in most of those articles, one assumed case remains that those institutions are key to Nepal foreign policy. There is very little effort in trying to understand how important they are, and that's the gap I intend to fill today. In this context, I have taken a quantitative approach to explain the importance of multilateral institutions. And to do that, I have put 5 indicators, which are based primarily on MOFA's annual report from 2015-16 to 2020, and development cooperation report, which is published by Ministry of Finance, and Nepal's foreign policy of 2077. Now, any other data unless cited during my presentation comes from these 3 major sources. So if the data is from other sources, I cite it as it comes. Now, I took the time period between 2016 and 2020 to analyze my section. Now, as I proceed further, there are 3 sections to today's presentation. First, I explain what multilateral institutions are in context of this article and their significance, especially to small states. These are primarily theoretical sections that I have. And then in the next section, I go into the depth of the 5 indicators that I have. Now, first of all, we all have heard of multilateral institutions. I think that's a very common term, but there are some other similar sounding terms as well, such as international organizations. There are also terms such as regimes, international laws. Now, in common parlance, some of these terms are used as a synonym for the others. For example, the 2 definitions that are there in the screen that can be seen in the screen, the first one is by Kyohen on international organizations, what international organizations are. The second is on regime. So he states that it is a set of connected rules, could be formal or informal, that prescribe behavior constraints on how states can behave or set expectations regarding how states will behave in a certain issue. Now, for the regimes, again, it's a rule and procedures that define the limits of acceptable behavior on various issues, and we're talking about global regimes. Now, for the context of this, in multilateral institutions will include the international organizations, both formal and informal, as we understand it, as it is defined by QAM. It will also include the regimes, and it will also include international agreements and international laws. Now, different theoretical frameworks understand such institutions in different ways, like already Antara ma'am also said during her presentation. Let me just summarize that a bit again. For neo-realists, for instance, they view these institutions as a means for major powers to extend their influence over smaller states. Now, that's one view. That's how neo-realists view that. For neoliberal institutionalists, the argument is that those institutions tend to have an independent effect of their own once they are already established, and especially if the norms are already diffused, right? So, and then in that way, they help solve the problems of cooperation, of collaboration, of coordination, and of association. Now, for small powers, it is additionally deemed to be important. This is the case for Nepal. For once, they offer formal equality, which small states or small powers in this context often deem very important to their self-respect in the conduct of foreign policy. They also practice a form of principle of sovereign equality in these forums. Now, they also help small states with collective bargaining and agenda setting, which can be critical for small states' participation in international forums. Now, without taking long, let me just get into the indicators so that I think that will take some time. So I'll focus on those straight away. Now, among first of the indicators, I have listed out the number of mentions of certain countries and certain international institutions in the annual report published by Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now we have the report since 2015-16, and I have analyzed the data till 2019-20. Now, generally speaking, the more important a relation is, the more the nation will engage with those institutions or with those bilateral partners, and hence the more it will be reflected in the annual report. That is the idea why I picked up this particular indicator. Now, if we look at the chart up here, it lists the top 5 bilateral relations that we have in terms of the number of mentions, and the top 5 multilateral institutions in terms of the mention in foreign in the annual report. Now, in terms of bilateral relations, the obvious suspects come on the top 2, those being India and China. And depending on, in 2018, it was the year to visit Nepal. Therefore, China has topped India in terms of number of mentions, but overall, those 2 countries come at the top. But if you look at the international institutions, the UN, SAARC, BIMSTEC, LDC, or LLDC for that matter, and NAM seem to be the top 5 most repeated institutions in the annual report. Now, overall, the mentions of those top 5 bilateral relations versus the top 5 multilateral institutions are more or less comparable, except for 2018. The rest of the year, it has been comparable, and especially for 2020, United Nations is the most repeated partner in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now, going to the next indicator, foreign visits by leadership indicate the closeness and importance of those particular relations. Hence, by high level, in this particular context, by high level visits, I mean visits by the president, by prime minister as head of state and head of government respectively, and then by foreign minister as the head of diplomatic Nepal's diplomacy. Now, even in this particular context, if we look at it, I have categorized into whether they visited abroad to primarily to attend a multilateral institution, to join a multilateral institution, or for bilateral visits. My results show that more or less there is equality in terms of numbers. For instance, in 2020, there were 3 visits to multilateral institutions, 4 visits to bilateral institutions. Same for 2019, there is a difference of 1, but there has been more visits to multilateral institutions during that particular period. And the same for other years. Even from this, the primary countries which our high-level visits, high-level leaders have visited are India and China, which were obvious. And in terms of multilateral institutions, it's the UN, and climate conferences seems to be featured regularly in these visits. Now, for the third, I looked at the actual aid disbursed during this particular period from 2016 to 2020. Now, this is a key foreign policy for Nepal, is Nepal is heavily dependent on aid. So I took the top 5 bilateral donors versus the top 5 multilateral donors, which includes all grant, loan, and technical assistance. This is a combination of all of this. Now, the top 10 donors from this particular context account for more than 90% of the aid to Nepal. Therefore, more or less, we can say they reflect the overall aid structure of Nepal. Now, the results again show that consistently multilateral institutions have provided more loans since 2016 to Nepal. And that gap, this is the percentage of loan accorded on the screen by the multilateral institution in blue and bilateral countries in red. And the gap has consistently increased since 2016. And coming to 2020 and 2021, I expect the gap to be larger because of the support from IMF, which has not been reflected in earlier cases. Now, next is the MOFA's structure. Now, the structure of MOFA, which is the primary institution for conducting foreign policy, indicates the relative importance that the country gives to certain partners. Now, even here, there are 2 major divisions which are meant for coordination with international organizations, that being regional organization division. The number that you can see in the bracket is the number of staffs in 2020 that each division had. The second one being UN International Organization and International Law Division. Now those divisions, besides that, a third one, National Planning, Development, Diplomacy, also partly deals with international institutions. Now, if you look at the number of staffs assigned to these two divisions in Regional Organization Division and UN International Organization and International Law Division, the number of staffs in those divisions are almost the same as those in South Asia Division, which involves one of our key partners, bilateral partners. This also shows that multilateral institutions feature quite heavily in terms of our foreign policy structure. Now, overall, the structure of MOFA is still a bit traditional in the sense that it is more focused around geographical regions. Despite that, you know, the fact that there are two divisions solely for multilateral institutions shows its importance to our foreign policy. Besides this, other ministries, besides Ministry of Foreign Affairs, have also some divisions or in some sections which deal with multilateral institutions. For instance, Ministry of Finance has a division which deals with international institutions. Ministry of Health and Population has it. Ministry of Defense too has a section which deals with multilateral institutions. In this context, MOFA is not the only one which has separate division to deal with international institutions. And finally, a cursory look at foreign policy of Nepal 2077 also indicates the same. Among the 9 or 10 guiding principles, 3 of them explicitly refer to international institutions, as I identified earlier: the United Nations, non-alignment, international laws, and global peace. As for the basis of foreign policy conduct as well, it is a similar scenario there as well. Now we have a few domestic basis of foreign policy conduct. Then after, again, it's the United Nations Charter, bilateral multilateral agreements, charter of sub-regional institutions of which Nepal is a member of. Now, with that, the 5 indicators show that the importance of multilateral institutions is almost on par numerically with the bilateral relations that we have in context of Nepali foreign policy, in saying that those two are not exclusive entities. After all, it is the states which are members of multilateral institutions as well. So improving relations with one in a multilateral setting will also have a positive impact on our bilateral relations or vice versa. So this study is just a comparison of the spatial setting and not a commentary on Nepal's bilateral relations or multilateral relations in that factor. So with that, I'd like to end my presentation here. I look forward to your comments and suggestions as I go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. Can you off your screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Santosh. He has somehow shared with us with the theoretical discourses and international convention and what we should do, data of based on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There are some specific kind of what Antara has shared with us, that probably we academia, we don't teach students, we are the small state, we teach small power. Probably we also go through some data where is our location in a, unlike a small state, Nepal is a small power. So that being a micro state, very tiny state, Israel is not a small power. Israel is a major power.
Yeah.
But Surendra Jarsa will share with us later on probably. So that what Santosh has made us as per the Rothstein 1968 classification of power, we are the small power. So that what kind of strategies should small power should have in multilateral fora. He has made some regime, multilateral organization, and formal rules. So these are also some other contribution by Santosh. So now we do have Pramodji, whether there is Dela around, or I'm not seeing her.
She's there, sir.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay,
Hello,
Dela
sir.
is here.
Namaste.
Okay,
Namaste, sir. Yes,
Dela
I'm here.
Prasain will be speaking from now on, and Dela, so far as I have known, so many of the speakers' bios should contour. You know what? Like I don't have organizers have given me any bios of speakers, so at least I'm not doing injustice to the speakers. So far as I have known them, I'm speaking often. Dela Prasain, she is a news editor of Radio Nepal now at the moment, English news editor. She used to read out English news at Nepal television before. And she's also one of our graduate IR in the second batch. And I think she also went to China, Sichuan University as a exchange student for 4 months in the second batch, and a very humble and eloquent English like news reader and then academic. I'm sure she will enlighten the young participant and we all about the role of Nepal in multilateral forum and international, like, forum, what kind of role Nepal should have, and what's Nepal so far has been playing the role in those like platforms. So now, Dela, please, over to you.
Thank you so much, my respected Dr. Khadga, sir. My warm greetings to you and all the dignitaries here, and I feel so honored and privileged to share this forum with all the distinguished speakers, and especially my guru, Dr. Khadga, sir. And I'd like to express my gratitude to NICE for having me here. And today I will be speaking on Nepal in the United Nations, and moving on to the topic now. In October 24, 1945, after the Second World War, around 50 countries came together and they were all determined to build the future that was better and that was more equal. They were determined to build the world where the dignity of human beings would be ensured, irrespective of gender, caste, ethnicity, religion, and that human rights would be respected and protected. And this is how the United Nations was formed. And Nepal proposed to become a member of the United Nations in 1949 and formally got the membership in 1955. And over the past more than 7 decades, UN agencies have worked together with Nepal's government, civil society, non-government organizations, and communities to achieve a wide range of results in different areas, including poverty, education, health, human rights, and pandemic, among others. And yes, it's a good news that on Thursday, the United Nations General Assembly had endorsed the proposal to graduate Nepal to the status of a middle-income developing nation from the category of a least developed country by 2026. And Nepal had already met the criteria for its graduation in between 2015 and 2018. And Nepal has been significantly contributing to the United Nations peacekeeping missions around the globe since 1958, after the 3 years of its membership in the United Nations. And the world community has applauded Nepal's dedication, its efficiency and commitment in the United Nations. And constitutionally directed by the foreign policy objectives of promoting world peace, Nepal is always committed to support the United Nations to achieve the world peace. Nepal respects the UN Charter, 5 principles of Panchashil and non-alignment, and it has also faith in international law, world peace, and disarmament. And as a peacekeepers contributing nation, Nepal currently stands in a second position, and it has currently deployed 5,571 peacekeepers in different peacekeeping missions around the globe, and including 294 female peacekeepers. And Nepali peacekeepers have always acknowledged difficulties and engaged in a tough operation. And as of now, Nepal has lost 84 peacekeepers, and Nepal has always maintained friendly relations with all and enmity with none, and has always been following the principles of neutrality. And over the years, our heads of delegations to the United Nations General Assembly have always expressed their commitment to work with the United Nations to resolve multiple issues such as international terrorism, transnational crimes, weapons of mass destruction, drugs, money laundering, human rights abuses, among others. And Nepal also looks towards the United Nations as the most important instrument, and United Nations is the place where Nepal could identify itself with the smaller nation, anti-colonial, anti-imperial, and anti-racial force. And while talking about different aspects, sustainable development goal has been a global agenda of the United Nations, and Nepal, as the member of the United Nations, is a part of this global initiative. And the Millennium Development Goals, based on Millennium Declaration in the year 2000 by the United Nations, has set the foundation for sustainable development goals to be achieved by 2030. The United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda have become Nepal's socio-economic development goals for the nation's welfare and prosperity. And Nepal also has taken stronger steps in maintaining, implementing sustainable development goals at all the levels, including national, regional, and local. And Nepal is also being successful in reducing absolute poverty. Likewise, progress has been made in child health sector, reducing infant mortality rate and under 5 mortality rate as well. So, having said this, Nepal's engagement with the United Nations covers the 3 pillars of the organization, and that is development, peace and security, and human rights. And firstly, in the development pillar, Nepal's partnership with the United Nations and its specialized agencies has grown and expanded to include a wide range of areas and geographical coverage of Nepal with organizations like World Health Organization and UNICEF, for example, have assisted Nepal in increasing recoveries of vaccinations, controlling disease, maternal and child health, sanitation, expanding literacy, women's education, and empowerment. And the World Health Organization's cooperation in controlling pandemics and epidemics has remained very significant from the very beginning. And we have received the United Nations UNHCR assistance for the management of the refugee population in country for many years, and Nepal have received relief services and put it in time of disasters and emergencies. Similarly, FAO has extended technical assistance and capacity building for the modernization and improvement of agricultural sector. Likewise, UNESCO has supported Nepal for conservation and preservation of heritage sites. Similarly, ILO has promoted social dialogue and decent labor policy. And United Nations has been a partner in disaster preparedness, mitigation and response, reducing vulnerabilities, enhancing resilience, providing safe environment. And yes, and the next is Nepal served twice in the United Nations Security Council as an elected non-permanent member, and that is in 1969 to 70 and in 1988 to 89. And Nepal is serving as the member of the United Nations Human Rights Council as well. Nepal was also elected as a temporary member of the council twice, and Nepal had played a significant role on passing special report on discrimination on color base, and also act as vice chairman of Disarmament Commission in 2004 AD. And Nepal is always in favor of the reformation of the United Nations, and that it believes that Security Council also should be made more representative, more transparent, and more democratic, holding that the council should reflect the balance of the North and the South. And Nepal is always supporting on the decision and resolution of the United Nations to promote peace and security around the globe. And Nepal has also established the United Nations Regional Center for Peace and Disarmament in Asia and the Pacific in Kathmandu. And Nepal has called for the protection of the rights of the small landlocked countries and landlocked developing countries in the United Nations sessions and other meetings as well. And moving on to now, Nepal's commitment to the human rights has been unflinching and total. The Constitution of Nepal is founded on universally recognized human rights and fundamental freedoms, equality, non-discrimination, and social and economic justice. And Nepal's engagement with the United Nations Human Rights Mechanism, including Human Rights Council, and its spatial procedure mechanisms, as well as the universal periodic review process, has been always constructive and cooperative. And Nepal is also currently the vice chair of the Convention on elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, SIDA, and by our respected Ma'am Abandana Rana. And yes, and Nepal has been regularly participating in the annual General Assembly sessions as well, and delegations from Nepal to the session of the United Nations General Assembly were headed at the ministerial level, others at head of the government level, and sometimes by the permanent representative as well. And even after the Maoist insurgency in Nepal, the United Nations mission in Nepal helped Nepal in its peace process. And while talking about the role of the UN bodies for overall development of the Nepal, the contribution of the UNDP needs to be addressed, and UNDP works jointly with several agencies to tackle several issues in Nepal. Like UNDP works with FAO, ILO, IOM, UNFPA, UN Habitat, UNHCR, UN, UNICEF, UN Women, among many others. And also the UNDP in Nepal works with the citizens and the government of Nepal and other development partners to achieve the fair and sustainable human development goals through the eradication of the poverty as well. So in my presentation, I have tried to analyze the relations between the Nepal and the United Nations, and how Nepal has been working with the United Nations in several areas, including peacekeeping and other development sectors. And while analyzing the role of Nepal in the United Nations, I even try to find out the reciprocal relations between the Nepal and the United Nations, whether the reciprocal relations has been maintained or not. And Nepal has been, and while analyzing what we found is that Nepal has been contributing significantly in the peacekeeping missions, peacekeeping operations, and no doubt, and Nepal's contribution in peacekeeping sector is high. And having said that, what I also need to say that Nepal needs to focus on other development areas as well. Because as Nepal, as the United Nations General Assembly has endorsed the proposal to graduate Nepal from the least developed countries to the middle income developing countries, and after 5 years, it will be the middle income developing nations. And if Nepal could not focus on the development agendas and the development sectors, and Nepal could not expand the development works with the United Nations agencies, here, and after 5 years, the transitions would be quite difficult as well. So having said that, I also like to highlight at the end that there are some challenges in peacekeeping as well. While talking about the challenges for fulfilling Nepal's peacekeeping role in the United Nations, the growing number of troops and police contributing countries are coming up with a desire to participate in the UN peacekeeping, so Nepal need to compete with them. And in recent time, many peacekeeping missions are in the French-speaking countries, and there is a demand of French language and training for the Nepalese peacekeepers as well. Similarly, another aspect is that there is a growing demand on high-tech units, such as engineers, aviations, medical units, and it's being difficult to say that for Nepal to compete in these sectors, and Nepal needs to deploy its troops in the volatile situation. So Nepal has to do everything possible to keep its troops safe and secure as well. And the members of the UN peacekeeping states, including Nepal, have agreed the deployment of female peacekeepers to certain percentage by 2020. The women serving in military contingents should be 15%, and for the military obtables and staff officers would be 25%, and the target for women serving the front police unit is 20%, and individual policy need 30%. So there is a challenge for Nepal as well to increase the recruitment of female forces, so it could increase the number of female peacekeepers in the United Nations mission. Having said that, I would like to end my presentation for today, and based on my presentation, I would be more than happy to listen to queries. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dela, for timely wrapping up your presentation. You have focused a wide range of Nepal's engagement in the UN, and in the meantime, you have foreseen some challenges what Nepal should or may face from now on as well. Well, because of the absence of one noted speakers, we'll have some spare time after one another speakers, so that I would like to encourage young participants taking advantage of this forum. So please make some very brief questions while listening our another noted speakers. Then I will open the floor for a while. Now let me, I'm pleased to introduce, thank you, Sunaina. However, at least I could have that record in my hard disk about Surendra Rawal. So even if you didn't share those bio of him, and I would like to introduce Brigadier General of Nepal Army, retired Brigadier General of Nepal Army, Dr. Surendra Rawal. And Dr. Rawal served Nepali Army for 3+ decades, 34 years, and he did laid many UN peacekeeping operation during his official tenure in Army. He was also D1, one of the very reputed position at the UN headquarters, and also had 4 master's degree from Nepali and international universities in strategic studies, political science, public administration. Also, he did is one of the highest, Army officers schooling or academic training, what we can call it a war college from American University. And also eventually he did his PhD in strategic studies. So recently he has published one very interesting article in Kantipur, and I have shared with my 3rd semester students, especially on strategic thought students, and to go through his article about Sun Tzu and Poudel. And Dr. Brigadier General retired Rawal, Surendra Rawal, is having with us. Thank you very much. And he's going to speak about very one of the very acclaimed soft power of Nepal in the multilateralism is our engagement in UN peacekeeping. And he himself witnessed work from field to Africa to New York, so that we are really much anticipating or enthusiastically looking forward to hear from Brigadier General retired Dr. Surendra Rawal about the UN peacekeeping participation as Nepal's soft power. Over to you, sir, please. So we are very happy to listen in for 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Khadga, sir. I heard you in the morning session, and I really appreciate your endeavor to contribute to the country by imparting knowledge on international relations. It's a very commendable job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's been a good afternoon. So good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank NICE and Dr. Pramod Jaiswal for giving me this opportunity. I'll be talking about peacekeeping as a source of Nepal's soft power. My job has been easier now. Dela Prasain has discussed a lot about Nepalese Army peacekeeping. So let me start how the peacekeeping has been used, whether it has been used as a soft power or not. The realist school is the, excuse me, the primary advocate of power. The Peloponnesian War, we know, between Athens and Sparta in 4th century BC tells us the power politics in ancient time. In 16th and 17th century, Machiavelli and Thomas Hobbes studied the importance of power. Lately in 20th century, Karl Morgenthau and Mearsheimer explained the power in greater detail. We know the Graham Allison's concept of Thucydides trap, the latest one, that is the latest episode of power study, I think. There are many definitions of power in politics, but the ability to do what you want or avoid or stop what you don't want is generally called power. In a way, the relation between power and politics is similar to relation between economics and money. In international relation, the power of a state is classified into two main types, conventional power, economic and the military power. Based on the nature, power is also divided into hard power and soft power. Hard power is the power of coercion and intimidation, whereas soft power is power of persuasion and attraction. Yet, the soft power is not the derivative of idealism. In his famous book, The Future of Power, political scientist Joseph Nye Jr. tells us that there is no contradiction between realism and soft power. Soft power is not another form of idealism or liberalism. Soft power is just another form of power to achieve desired in a state. When we talk about soft power, we need to understand that the sources of soft powers of any country depends on its culture, political values, and foreign policy. Despite having very resources, soft power has not been fully utilized or realized in Nepal. One of the most likely source of soft power is Nepal's participation in United Nations peacekeeping mission. Nepal has been trying to mobilize the army as a soft power tool for a long time. As Dela mentioned earlier, in 1955, just 3 years after securing the membership of the United Nations in 1955, Nepal sent military observer for international peacekeeping. After the deployment of the first contingent in 1974, Nepal's participation in peacekeeping became widespread. Nepal, one of the top troop contributing countries since the last 6 decades, recently became the second largest contributor, as Dela also mentioned that. In fact, for almost half a century, Nepali peacekeepers have been one of the most sought after contingent in the UN mission. The key reason behind that is the honesty and the loyalty of the Nepali soldiers. Whether it is a tedious or challenging task, achieving any missions without hesitation are rooted in Nepalese contingent's peacekeeping culture. Another striking reason for Nepal's peacekeepers' worldwide demand is their ability to quickly intermix with any society and environment. No matter how difficult is the situation, Nepali soldiers present themselves as the pillar of strength of UN peacekeeping. Adaptability is in Nepalese DNA. I would say this is a unique selling proposition. This unique selling proposition of Nepali people further creates their demands in the supply chain of peacekeeping and peace and security business. Certainly, the contribution of Nepali army to world peace is viewed from different angles. Some have argued that peacekeepers go to conflict regions with the motive of earning lucrative income and institutional benefit. That's also true, but these are only analysis from the personal and organizational perspective. The national interest is at the heart of the Nepalese peacekeeping, which is often overlooked. Participation in peacekeeping mission is a part and parcel of Nepal's foreign policy goal. In the year following the World War II, when Nepal struggled to endure as a sovereign nation, peacekeeping participation became an important tool to recognize Nepal as a sovereign nation in the international field. The same contribution, as Dela also noted earlier, also enabled Nepal to become a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council twice in 1969 and 1988. The Nepali army also benefited institutionally, there is no doubt about it. In terms of organizational interest, the Army's Welfare Fund, created by levy deducted from Nepalese peacekeepers and the reimbursement received from the United Nations, has now reached over 50 billion rupees. It has helped to raise morale of the rank and file of the Nepalese army by conducting various military welfare activities. Surely, there are many other dimensions of the Nepali army's participation in the UN peacekeeping mission. The experience gained by the Nepalese soldiers enhanced professionalism, and the awareness is just another aspect. Peacekeeping was the vital source of earning of the foreign currencies before the Nepalese youth became a significant part of the international labor market. Today, Nepal's peacekeeping participation remains the main talking point of any delegation to the UN headquarters, whether it is small or big. The peacekeepers have an exceptional contribution behind a membership or a chairmanship opportunity that Nepal gets in various committees and agencies of the United Nations. The UN peacekeeping mission is a powerful platform for creating and maintaining soft power for Nepal. There is no doubt about it. Although soft power may seem less risky than economic and military power, it is difficult to use and easily lost without preservation. It requires time and effort to restore after it is lost. In the past, Nepal worked hard to convert its participation in peace mission into soft power. But with the political changes of 1990 multi-party system, peacekeeping is seen only as a private matter of Nepali army and is not being transformed into soft power. Countries cannot create soft power unless they convert resources. Transformation requires a serious efforts from the governments that involves creating attraction, agenda setting, and persuasion to turn resources into soft power. In the foreign policy of Nepal, 2077, made public by the government of Nepal, it has been stated that one of the aims of the foreign policy is to promote soft power through conducting public diplomacy. However, government of Nepal does not seem to have the concept of transforming peacekeeping participation into soft power. It is not there. In recent decades, there has been a little coordination between peacekeeping participation by the army and its conversion into soft power through diplomacy. The embarrassing defeat of Nepal during the election of non-permanent membership of the Security Council in 2006 is a clear sign of diplomatic and political failure. It is idealistic to think that country can create soft power through foreign attraction towards Nepal without any effort. That's simply not possible. We now see the ranking of nations with soft power. For example, in the Global Soft Power Index 2021 of 100 countries compared by brand finance, Nepal ranked 95th, whereas many small and developing nations are far ahead of Nepal. These reports indicate that in recent time, Nepal has not been able to create and use soft power effectively. So in the end, I would like to mention that there is a common misunderstanding that foreign attraction automatically creates soft power. I would like to emphasize again that the participation of soldiers in a peacekeeping mission does not create soft power automatically. It needs a lot of effort. Moreover, the army alone cannot create soft power. Diplomats and politicians should convert the attraction created by the Nepalese army through peacekeeping participation into soft power. For that, it is necessary to get set agenda. We need to create a narrative, and the diplomats and politicians should persuade others. On the whole, soft power depends on the country's attractiveness, credibility, and diplomatic ability. Therefore, to transform the peacekeeping participation into soft power, it is necessary for the military, diplomatic community, and political circles to coordinate with each other and showing the right strategy, capability, efficiency, and determinations to implement it. With that, I stop here. If there are any questions, I will be more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Surendra Rawal, Brigadier Retired of Nepali Army. So, in fact, we don't have anything much to say except your focus while talking about Nepal's multilateral engagement. Whatever we did so far for last 6+ decades, largely our contribution to peacekeepers. These are the only matters, whatever we have given the nomenclature as a soft power, military diplomacy, and so on and so forth. Since after India-Pakistan partition in 1947, our military officers became the observer of Indo-Pakistan border in 1947. That was the departure point of, we should feel proud of being the oldest nation state of South Asia. That when India, Pakistan was partitioned by colonial masters, we didn't have police before army, Our police and bureaucracy built up later 1950 onward, but we had army for 200+ years. 250+ years battalion are there in Nepali army. They are celebrating the 250 years plus anniversary of Nepali, different battalion of Nepali army. So that our engagement in regional peacemaking, the departure point was Indo-Pakistan partition observation. And after Lebanon in late 50s, and Africa, there is no country in Africa Nepal army has so far not reached. Even in Libya, even in Syria, the most dangerous peace breaker of the contemporary world, the demand of Nepalese armies, which has proven earlier working on behalf of British colonial empires, recruiting in British army as a Gurkhas. In the meantime, proving our army's credential, working on behalf of the Nepali flag. So that's the only thing where we can talk much is Surendra Rawal, Dr. Surendra Rawal spoke. Whenever any politician, any diplomats visit Geneva to New York, the only thing we can talk much about multilateralism, multilateral engagement, our contribution is the peacekeepers. So, however, in the meantime, Dr. Rawal also mentioned that military alone, peacekeepers alone, that contribution should be transformed into narratives, discourses, and lead by the diplomats. So eventually, he has concluded that even today we talk about Sagarmatha, Mount Everest, Gautam Buddha, peacekeepers, flora and faunas, Bhikuti, Araniko. We often tirelessly named so many soft power icon of Nepal, but we are 95th out of 100. So that's still quite behind. Quite behind. How can we foster our soft power through our multilateral engagement? So young generation people, those who are in this platform this morning, you can be the soft power of this country in future. So I will make my concluding remarks at the end, but I just wanted to aid or appreciate Dr. Rawal's very comprehensive and thoughtful sharing on the basis of his knowledge and experiences. It's a very great lesson for Nepal. We have to do quite a lot. We are still quite behind to exploiting our soft power. What we do have still unexposed. So that, what is the weaknesses behind? politician, political system, diplomats, the leadership quality. There's so many things we have to check correct from now on. So having said this, I am really thankful to every speakers, those who eloquently share their thoughtful ideas and especially related with Nepal's engagement in multilateral for us. So now we are already 12:21, and hopefully nice Dr. Jaiswal and his team allow me to have a few minutes for opening the floor. If there are any questions, some of the questions are already in chat box, like Sagarjan Karki has raised one question. I will hand over or convey these questions to every speakers. If you can address in some point what Sagar has raised, that what measures can Nepal as a small power in promoting its, what measures can Nepal take as a small power in promoting its soft power diplomacy? I think strategic measures what Nepal can take to promote its soft power diplomacy. This is the question for every speakers you can address. Now, I will open floor for 10 minutes, and whenever any questions raised to particular speakers, and I will request the concerned speakers to respond at a time. Unlike there will be a kind of mismatch. So floor is open. Is 12:20 and 10 more minutes for everyone else. Then after I will be back to the speakers. Come up if there are any questions, comments, and feedbacks to the speakers, and even there's one path-breaking questions by Dr. Jaiswal to every speakers. Do you think that the UN WHO was successful in dealing with the COVID? Why was WHO caught into the controversy? Probably geopolitics, global power relation, and so probably there are so many things. We can have another seminar on this topic, however. So this is questions from Professor Dr. Jaiswal to every speakers. Any more? You should be very much inquisitive. Don't get this much passive. Argumentative Indian. No, have you gone through the book by Amartya Sen? Bade bade jai to tattvabodh. This is the South Asian value. We do work less, speak much, South Asian especially. So that Amartya Sen wrote that book, Argumentative Indian. Indians are smarter, in mean that the South Asian normally are smarter in speaking, argumenting, unlike accomplishing their defined duty. So now, at least in this discourse, come up with your points. There is another question from Ashish. What benefits does UN peacekeeping brings to Nepal by sacrificing life of young Nepali soldiers? I think Ashish, can you introduce yourself? This is not the sacrificing. We are not fighting with any enemy country in the UN. We are the peacekeepers in between probably some peace breakers, rebellion, opened the fire, and accidentally some of our soldiers lost their life. But now we are openly fighting in the peacekeeping zone. And what many speakers spoke this morning were contribution materialistically, as Dr. Rawal has already said, that 50 billion rupees are now there in the Nepali army fund from the saving of UN peacekeeping, like some contribution by the peacekeepers. And moreover, billions has been contributing to the soldiers as materially, but diplomatically, we are highly demanding in UN peacekeeping operation. Because of Nepali army contribution in peacekeeping force, many of our diplomats in New York and Geneva, they are filing the files, you know. Unlike doing anything else, some of our diplomats look another job in New York after retiring or in between. They are just lobbying for another job at the UN. And Tirelist is speaking about the Nepali army contribution in the UN. So that this is a great contribution of Nepal to peacekeepers in my perspective. So now I will request Antara any if you have one question directly to Antara from Kalpana, could you please critically examine Nepal's foreign policy in terms of multilateralism? Being a serving diplomat, how much like Antara will be critical? So come up like at least with your point. This is one question to Antara. Another one is overall questions like, you know, with the emerging discourse of sharp power and smart power, don't you think soft power is overrated? Well, Naveen Bhattrai, probably he's our student. If I'm not wrong, there is one Naveen Bhattrai in our class, but might be another Naveen Bhattrai here as well. And Chun Gurung, why do you think the armies from the least developed countries such as Nepal are significantly contributing? Well, Chunji, I can answer this question. If you send the army from P5, they are always biased, you know. From Russia, United States, China, Britain, France, they are fighting everywhere in the world. They are not independent army. They are not neutral. So that their engagement in UN peacekeeping is always dangerous because they are fighting with each other. So that peacekeepers are largely from the developing country. Okay, I will request Antara, if you see some question over there, come up with your points in 2-3 minutes. 5 minutes I can give you. Okay, come up with your like observation, and then we'll go for Santosh and Dela, and then after Dr. Rawal. Antara, please, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Khadga, and thank you to all the distinguished speakers for very insightful presentations. The questions suddenly started coming in, and I picked up some of them, 3 or 4 of them. I'd like to start with the soft power question. What are the ways Nepal could leverage its soft power? I think it depends on which area you want to pick up on. I'll just mention 2 or 3 points. The first one would be, if you're speaking from the economic perspective, perhaps Nepal could, you know, right away start with branding our very, very long traditionally held qualitative products like, you know, tea, for instance, or pashmina, for instance, and link it with the, you know, digital transformation, link it with the access of landlocked countries, our negotiations of the rights of the landlocked countries under the provisions of, Convention on the Law of the Sea, and also the, you know, various programs of UN machinery such as Istanbul Program of Action and others which favor LDC. And there are also waivers, numerous waivers within the international legal system as well as the order, wherein we can utilize our waivers, you know, our herbal products, for example, and brand it in a way for the digital collaborations, given the post-pandemic context, and amp it up our economic products. There you go, in the global market, link it to all the way to the farmers, small farmers and small, you know, producers. 1. 2 would be, politically speaking, the branding could be how we need a successful transition to, you know, peace process. Nepal is one of the rare examples where we have our own homegrown of the, you know, successful conclusion of peace process, and thereafter the, you know, forming of a very progressive constitution, etc. That branding is something sought after by international community. They want the technical expertise, etc. I think it's time. We have lots of experts working in this, having long worked for decades of years. We could brand that, create a very strategic, expert team and brand them in the international institutions and make some exchanges that is supported diplomatically with the diplomatic bastions present in the New York and Geneva. Geneva being, of course, very much of a core center for the peace processes, and small countries, smaller power countries as such can make a mark here, offering their expertise. Two of those examples, how we can leverage our soft power. Then the other question was, do you think multilateralism is crumbling? Personally, in my opinion, I do not think it can be assessed that it is crumbling. It needs reforms, long-standing issues after the Cold War and the 1990s liberalization, etc. We went through those phases, and the institutions that are standing on need reforms that have been long built. The issues have been long built, but we have created a system in the world. I think a global platform such as UN, even if we will call it a different name in a different domain, it is not replaceable, or it is not erasable, I would say. You may transform it to something else, call it different names with different powers of, based on equitability, the questions of, all countries participating on a more equitable basis on the issues, call it different names. But the spirit of multilateralism is more, has never been weaker, I would say, with the pandemic, in fact, is the latest manifestation, how we need more of collaboration. No country can solve it on its own. So in my opinion, it's not crumbling, but the issues need to be addressed in a more effective and a smarter manner with reforms. The third is a critical approach to multilateralism of Nepal's engagement, I suppose, given that's what we are discussing here. For smaller power countries as such, a critical approach would be to say that we have not, as Nepal as a country, we have not held up certain strategic priorities as much as we used to. For example, say, I recall very much the documentation within my diplomatic experience related to disarmament, how much of voice we used to present very systematically, very much of with a lot of priorities in terms of being against the conflict in the world. I think Dr. Surendra Rawal also mentioned, the active participation of military and other entities of the nation at large, which took up, especially in the 1990s, 80s, and 90s, 70s, I would say, there were strategic priorities such as disarmament, etc., where we invested a lot. In the latter part, we have made new priorities such as human rights being one. In the multilateral system, Human Rights Council, after 2018, as we saw. But I think the critical stance would be to say not leaving what we already built a long heritage of. We have certain strengths that we have built, and those things I do feel, disarmament being one, I do feel that we have paid lesser of the attention, and I think it would be of the interest of the country to make newer linkages with the issues that we prioritized in the past, and link it in the modern sense to make it more effective. And then I also mentioned in my presentation at the end, I would say, the critical stances would be, our capacity, resources, constraints. I think Santosh sir also presented very well the human resources chart, how, bilateral, given the comparison with the bilateral, the multilateral, I think it needs more, definitely, given the issues are myriad. It is related to the world. You compare with South Asia, where we have 10 or 11 people working, then we have 9 of us in the UN system. That was a very good indicator how we definitely at least need to double it up or triple it up to build the capacities. It's not enough. That would be my critical approach towards how we are performing in multilateralism. Thank you. Am I allowed more time, Dr. Khadga?
No, actually, I was hanging somehow of some time. Anyway, thank you very much, Antaraji, for your comprehensive elaboration of those queries on our engagement in through the multilateral platforms. So absolutely, I agree with your points, and there are so many shortcomings from our part as well. We have it to branding, whatever we do have. Still, we are not enough to branding our cultural, civilizational, what we do have back in home, and natural beauties, and then even modern constitutional provision, what we did incorporate to the 2015 constitution. So we do need quite a lot from now on. So to make us most visible presence in the international forums, our multilateral diplomatic frameworks. So thank you very much once again, Praji, for your eloquent, very much comprehensive and down to earth, experience-based sharing, which is really most useful for everyone, those who are in this platform this morning, this afternoon. So now let me request Santoshi to make your observation quickly. You try to address what are the frameworks with the MOFA or Nepali state institution to cope up with the multilateral issues, whether institutional structure back in home with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or Nepali state mechanism apparatuses are big enough to tackle, to cope up, to handle the coming of global, regional, international challenges. That's your attempt while making your speech earlier. Now there are some questions raised by participants. Probably you have already scanned in the chat box. So I request you to address those questions in very brief with the theoretical clouding. So please, over to you, Santoshi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody, for the questions and comments. Let me first start with the question where if multilateralism is on a backward slide. I would definitely not think so. I think the debate has been with the rise of geopolitics and geopolitical competition at a global scale. Multilateralism seems to be on the receiving end of it. However, if we look at the kind of issues that are coming up, for example, just two events which recently happened, the COP26, which is about climate change, or the cases around COVID, the kind of issues that most of the countries are facing now are more global in nature. So that would require more multilateral cooperation than it used to before. Therefore, with the change in the kind of issues before, now we have more global issues. Climate change being a core component of them, pandemic, another part, global peace, terrorism, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and whatnot. These are global issues which would require global participation and hence multilateral institutions. In that context, I don't see multilateralism fading away in any way, but rather its importance being more and more in future together with the issues. Now, regarding soft power, I think let me just comment, even though I didn't make a presentation on that, but regarding sources of Nepal's soft power, I have some misgivings about it. For example, if we have to quote three of Nepal's major soft power sources, we tend to quote Buddha, Everest, Gurkhas. Now, out of these three, one is a natural happenstance that Nepalese didn't do much to have Everest there. It just was there. Buddha happened more than 2,000 years ago, and we have hardly done enough to take that legacy forward in any meaningful way. So out of the three major sources, two are those which we do not have much contributions on. So unless the sources of soft power are those in which we actively participate and aid something in value, these are not going to be having a long-lasting impact. There are certain areas in which Nepal has the expertise. For example, Antara ma'am has already said the way we handled our insurgency and the peace process afterwards. That's a very unique phenomenon that we developed by our own. It hasn't happened before much. Similarly, the case about the constitution and the inclusivity that it enhances. We were one of the few countries which had other in our passport way before most of the advanced nations had it. Even for those which even promoted having other in the passport, they didn't have other in their own passports when we had it. That's another source, or the gender equality, at least nominally, which has started. Hopefully that will change in qualitatively as well. But that's another sector which we can do, or even in simple areas such as the Zolunge pool, for which it was exported to African countries in large amount, but then we never hear about our expertise in Zolunge pool being talked about as a source of our soft power. Now that is one technology definitely where we excelled at. Now these are ones which were developed by people in recent times. Right? So unless we change our framework from the existing ones or ones which are here just by the sheer luck of nature, our soft power is unlikely to move forward much. Now, with that, I think I'd also like to very briefly address Khadga's question regarding whether the MOFA structure is pertinent or is commensurate with our interest in international institutions. For some reason, I think Antara ma'am would be able to answer that as well from a very insider's perspective. Let me just give some perspective from how I look outside. Overall, I think our size in terms of resources, human and financial both, of Ministry of Foreign Affairs is much limited. Together with that, in terms of human resources and also in terms of finance, in saying that, I think we need to develop certain expertise when we are dealing with multilateral institutions. In COP, we need to negotiate about climate change. For that, we need people in Ministry of Foreign Affairs who can understand both negotiation and climate change. Now, our structure is such that every year and a half or in 2 years, the offices get transferred from one department to another, and there is less opportunity for them to develop a certain level of expertise in one specific area. I think that is where the government, or at least the structure of MOFA, could be changed. Second part, I think we need divisions based on more thematic areas, that the issues which are more important to Nepal, than based on geographic regions. Now we may have America and Africa division, but then in terms of their importance in Nepal's foreign policy, there are certain key issues that joins us together. So if we have divisions based on those interest issues, that could help our position. Third part is, I think what our MOFA lacks is a basic research to build upon its foreign policy or arguments as well. The institution, Institute of Foreign Affairs, which is supposed to do some research, lacks from resources again and again the expertise as well. The budget of IFA is hardly a percentage of what we spend in one of our embassies abroad. Now, with that amount, it's difficult to come up with some research which could help MOFA make better decisions. That's why our framing of our foreign policy, our framing of our relations with India, our framing of our independent and balanced policy has never moved beyond, or there has not been any major discussions with the narrative itself. And we are still stuck with Prithviraj Shah's Yam Between Two Boulders narrative still. It is relevant, but that narrative should be challenged, should be discussed, and we should move towards more engaging narrative than a very zero-sum type narrative over there. With that, I'd like to stop here, sir. If there's anything, then I'll be happy to
Thank
answer
you
here.
very much, Santosh. Thank you so much. It's quite enough to enlighten those you all from your perspective. So now let me request Dela, if there are anything to you can add at the end. Dela, please spare some 3-4 minutes, and I will request Dr. Rawal at the end.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you all the participants and speakers. And here, I think this question is for me, and it is quite interesting question regarding from Sagar Zong Karki, and the question is: do you think that the United Nations and World Health Organization were successful in dealing with the COVID, and why was WHO caught into the controversy? And yes, as Khadga sir said, it's a very debatable issue, and it's being debatable since long. But for our country, and I must say right now, is WHO has really done a lot for the country like us in controlling, in curbing COVID-19. And being a media person, I have been covering the news of WHO since long, since the pandemic started in 2019 December. And WHO has been time and again allotting everyone that, and it was predicting, and the predictions of the World Health Organization has always come true. First, it said that the European continent would be the most affected, then it happened, and then it said Asia Pacific, it happened, and it said South Asia region, and it happened. And for the vaccine, also WHO has done a lot for us, especially for us. And the World Health Organization has always lobbied and implemented for the global vaccine access and the equity. And as a result, almost 33% of us have already received the first jab of COVID-19 vaccine. And that's the most important thing the WHO has done for the country like us, because WHO has always lobbied for the COVAX facility and implemented the COVAX facility, and it always urged the developed nations to provide vaccine equity and to provide vaccine to the poorer, least developed, and the developing nations. And that's why, and it's I don't think that at least for us it's not a controversy. Yes, there are so many controversies regarding the vaccine and the COVID control in within the World Health Organization, and yes, it come in controversy, but I must say that it was the major achievement for us, at least for us, because even many of the elderly citizens were able to receive the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccines very early, when the developed nations had not been able to provide jabs to their own citizens as well. And that's the tremendous achievement, I must say. And the next question I would like to address is I must read the questions first. And the question was, it was like, it was about what measures. I think I'm somewhere in between. There was a question that what benefits that Nepal can get by the sacrifices of the lives of the young Nepali soldiers. I don't think Nepal send peacekeepers to the peacekeeping destinations to sacrifice their lives. The foreign policy of Nepal is always guided by the principle of the world peace and security, and Nepal has always abided by the faith. Nepal has always abided its faith in the UN Charter, and and the UN Charter is the guiding elements of Nepal's foreign policy as well. And Nepal is a peace-loving nation, and yes, as Khadga sir also said, that if the P5 countries deployed its troops in peacekeeping destination, that would not be fair. Yes, and that's why we Nepali have been sending peacekeeping troops in different peacekeeping destinations, and unfortunately our peacekeepers had lost their lives, and that's very tragic, and we should give huge respect and salute to them. But yes, while talking about some of the benefits, not only by the sacrifice, but what benefits that yes, we can say that what benefits benefits that Nepal can reap by sending peacekeeping troops in different destinations. Of course, the first and foremost, it's the economic benefits, because I have seen my previous generation, many in my previous generation circles who have been in the peacekeeping missions and who have really earned a good amount of money and invested in different sectors in Nepal, and that has benefited their family members and themselves as well, their children, and of course, and many in the next generation as well. And the next question that I would like to address is regarding the soft power. Yes, we have, while talking about soft power, yes, as Antara and Santosh already mentioned, that the utilization of the local resources, that yes, we should focus on our production and our manufacture. We should strengthen our manufactures and productions as well. We have so many good resources such as Pashmina, Dhaka, and I would like to give another example as well. I had been to Egypt some 3 years back, and then at that time, I had gifted some Dhaka fabrics to my friends over there, and later what happened was some 10 to 12 friends, my other friends, ordered Dhaka from Nepal. And that's the thing, that not only the government and state is responsible, but we ourselves are responsible to enhance and to promote soft power diplomacy. And another example I would like to take is that Nepali cuisines are the most healthiest cuisines in the world, and has the most nutrition values. So recently our very popular and famous chef Santosh, who did tremendous job, who did significant job to enhance Nepali food, Nepali cuisines, dal bhat, and by modifying, by amending, and by mixing Nepali cuisines with other cuisines, and sold it to the world community. And that's a great example that, and we can do from our side as well. And well, with this, I would like to conclude my answer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for very informative responses. So almost we consume like given time. So we have 8 minutes left. Seems like there are some other session after 1 p.m. Onward as well. So Dr. Rawal, would you please respond or sum up in 2-3 minutes if there are any questions you are interested to respond?
Yes, thank you, Khadga sir. I think the most of the queries have been answered, and I agree with Khadga sir and Antara ji and Dela ji. It seems that they know a lot about Nepali peacekeeping and return on investment of Nepali peacekeeping. Definitely, the question from Ashish ji and Chun Gurung ji, they were asking basically about what is the return on investment of the peacekeeping. What is the we get from all the sacrifice that we make. Actually, this business of the peacekeeping or business of peace and security is something different from the other normal kind of business, and it's not easy to identify the return on investment. Most of the return on investments are intangible, and most are seen in a due course of time, not immediately. However, I have presented some of the benefit that we get from our contribution. Basically, as Khadga sir also mentioned, that Nepalese army, they are getting a lot of benefit because they are much aware of the situation in international arena. They are becoming professional, and they are getting a lot of training. For example, if you see the Nepalese army, they are aware of human rights, and they know the protection of civilian, all those kind of things. And I don't want to talk much because we can relate these kind of situations to how did Nepalese army handle the Maoist insurgency. It also relates to that, otherwise the thing could have been different. Similarly, not only the fund, but the intangible side is the recognition that Nepal gets, the image of Nepal as a peace-loving country, a country of peacekeepers, that has a completely different connotation. As Santosh ji mentioned, we have three major source of soft power: the Buddhas, Himalayas, and Gurkhas, or Nepalese peacekeeper. The most important thing is that we have the resources, and there is a chain of reaction we need to understand. We have the resources, and the resources creates attraction, and attraction has to be converted. And we have to, our diplomats and politicians, they need to influence the international community, international actors, and that has to be converted into soft power. Soft power doesn't automatically convert, from the resources. Yes, maybe it's in the field of business or art or beauty, some kind of soft power might be created just because of attraction. But in international systems where all states are competing for power, just sitting idle and thinking that, okay, foreigners, they admire us and then that will be converted into soft power is just a delusion. It doesn't happen like that. We have to put a lot of effort. As we have discussed earlier, to put a lot of efforts, we have to actually do a lot of things at Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because that is our focal point. That should be our focal point, and we have to encourage, we have to embolden, we have to, if necessary, restructure the MOD, and our MOD people should be, they are more capable. We need to give more resources to them. Just Antara ji was saying that with the meager resources, they cannot do the job in international sector. So I would say more coordination required among the different stakeholders. In the case of peacekeeping, the Nepalese Army's role and the diplomats' roles and the politician roles, they have to, all these have to come together. We have to have a very good coordination among us, and then we can convert our the soft power attraction into soft power. So that's what I have to say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rawal, Antaraji, Surya Santoshi, and Dela, for your really much thoughtful and thought-provoking sharing. So I'm sure everyone, those who are in this session, have heavily benefited from learned people and experienced people and professional speakers. So now I just wanted to wrap up with 4-5 points because we have just 2 minutes left. So how we can enhance our presence in multilateral and international forums. So categorically, Dr. Rawal, Antaraji, practicing diplomat, Santoshi, and Dela have responded. Of course, I don't have any virgin ideas here. However, 5 points I would like to share at the end. We do need socio-economic transformation. Countries like profile should be enhanced. GDP, GNP, HDI index of Nepal, when we started to aspire to graduate from LDC, and if we become a developing country, if we become a middle income country, our passport ranking will be better off, So first of all, your identity in international arena, being a developing or middle income country, everyone will look you different angles, different eye. Sagars and Karki asking that cultural diplomacy, why we cannot promote Dasain Tiyar, Kukur Tiyar, so on and so forth. Nobody will enthusiastic to see our culture when we were still poor. So that Nepal's images of LLDC should be transformed first. Second, for that also, for diplomacy also, we do need a political stability. Otherwise, when we engage much back in home, domestic affairs much, we cannot expose ourselves assertively, strongly in international arena. Third, consensus-based foreign policy making is needed. When one government comes, they do apply one things, and then another government comes and they do make we want to make some version like policy, indigenous, really much like path breaking, unlike the former government. That's really wrong idea. At least for foreign policy, we do need a consensus, so that consensus-based foreign policy. Fourth, of course, we do need a competent diplomat. Otherwise, investing in what Antaraji also shared with us, resource poorness. We have a 30 plus like diplomatic mission, and few 100,000, few million rupees, dollars will not be big enough to promote our international engagement. So that competent diplomat and enough relatively on the basis of our national economy, enough resources is needed for exposing ourselves in the international platform. And fourth is this. Fifth, of course, to promote our soft power, engagement in peacekeeping, and diaspora, exploiting diaspora. There are quite bunch of people and diaspora individually doing great job across the developed world. Unlike having hassle in NRN, so-called NRN election also should be looked after by the MOFA. This is really NRN are fighting in Belgium and Brussels to New York to the South Africa. They are showing our Nepali style even in the foreign land. That's not giving positive, smart or soft power in international arena. So there are some certain good established NRN people. Those diaspora should also be utilized in favor of Nepal's soft power. So there are long list how we can do better off in our engagement in international community. However, socio-economic development of the country, political stability, and then political consensus for consensus-based foreign policy, competent diplomat, resource availability, and enhancing peacekeepers. We are the second peacekeepers contributor, but how many force commanders so far we have received from the UN? Whether our diplomacy could promote for that. So these are the things what we have to do from now on. Thank you so much, everyone, speakers, organizers, and participants for having with us for last 2 hours. And hopefully you all didn't have boring time for 2 hours. And thank you very much once again, Nice and Dr. Jaiswal for giving me this platform. Wish you all the best and have a great day ahead. Thank you so much. I'm done.
Thank you, sir.